are managing the questions?
So the questions, how it's going to work, we'll just close off the Zoom after, and then we'll go to Discord. Each, like Karina and you, will have your own channel, and then people are just going to join in, and then I'll be monitoring if like there is a lot of people, I'll be helping you out in the rooms. Otherwise, yeah, for sure, already go for it. Otherwise, I'll just monitor the chat.
Cool.
Make sense?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Do you guys see the recording as it started?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, Yasmina, yeah, she said like those channels name is W3 office hours, blah blah. And there is a parenthesis with your name, so you should be able to select the correct one. Hello everyone. We're just gonna wait a tiny bit more so that everyone can join. Also, guys, I would appreciate if you could like rename yourselves like to team, the number, dash, and then your first name, so we know who is who, and we're not like confused, basically. Thanks. Just wait like a few more minutes and then we can go ahead. Okay, like 1 more minute because like we have a bunch of people still coming in. Just for everyone, please rename yourselves as like team number and then the first name, so we know who is there, please. Sorry, Elvis, I cut you off. You wanted to say something?
No, I just said sounds good.
Okay, well, it sounds good indeed. Okay, perfect. Okay, we'll go for it now and just admit if the few people that may be a bit late. So, hi everyone, my name is Victor. I'm part of GCS. I hope you've been enjoying the day so far. I hope also the 2 workshops, I was not able to attend them unfortunately, but I hope they were fruitful and interesting to you guys. So today, like now we're the last workshop, the last let's say milestone for you guys, and we're doing the business strategy and presentation workshop. For that, I'm very happy to introduce both Karina and Elvis. You should see them waving most probably, and they are both from Fintech Cadence, a nonprofit based out of District 3 near Concordia. I would strongly suggest to check out if you're interested in fintech, their different programs as well as the overall company, because it's very interesting ones. They've got a lot of programs that go in depth into fintech, and also overall like how to create a company in this domain. So definitely check them out, and also don't hesitate. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer any questions related to that. And I think without further ado, I'll just like give you the hand to Karina and Elvis to go for the workshop.
Thank you so much, Victor. So I'll start off with a quick intro, and so Elvis, you'll be helping me with the presentation. So my name is Karina Riviello. I'm the University Liaison at Fintech Cadence, and Elvis is our Director of Financial Health. We'll talk a bit more. Well, Elvis will present himself a bit more later on. So thank you, Victor, also for telling us about Fintech Cadence. Today for the workshop, we'll be doing a first half hour. We'll kind of cover all you need to know about the go-to-market strategy. And then the second half hour, we'll go more into storytelling, pitching, how to present your information. And of course, the next hour is for office hours. So by the way, we invite everyone, if you can, to turn your cameras on. I know it's not fun, but for us, it's easier to know how you're feeling about what we're saying. If we're too boring and we see you sleeping, we know that we need to change our pace and kind of move things up a bit, okay? So it would help us. So who are we, Fintech Cadence? We're nonprofit. We've been around like for 4 years, like Victor mentioned. Our mission is really to help create the future fintech leaders of tomorrow, especially founders of startups. We do this through many events. We do a lot of education. We do a lot of support with startups. We also work in collaboration with all the actors of the fintech ecosystem, such as financial institutions. We work a lot with regulatory bodies also. And of course, we work hand in hand with many startups every day. Victor kind of mentioned quickly our programs. I won't go too much time on that. I know you guys are not there for that, but quickly, we have a certificate. It's a formation of 7 weeks where we kind of go over all the fundamentals of fintech. If ever you're interested in know more, please reach out. We also have an incubation program called Ascension. Ascension is around fintech, very like the large verticals of fintech, so it's a very large domain. We have another incubation program called IFH. So I know that the business proposal today for the fintech sector is around financial health. So if ever you're interested, Elvis can tell you more about that later. And we also have a pre-incubation program. So if you guys are into hackathons and you ever eventually would like to do another kind of hackathon that's a bit longer, Formaton is coming up in a few months. And I think that could be super interesting for anyone who's in the fintech track presently. We also have a couple of events. We have a few coming up. If ever you're interested in learn more about fintech, or connect with people from the fintech industry, Fintech Juice, we have one next week. We also have a university series panel next week. So check out our social media for more info about that. It will be great. Go-to-market strategy. Elvis, I'll let you take on from there.
Sweet. So thanks, everyone. Hope you're having a good, fun day so far. Just a quick intro for myself. I'm the Director of Financial Health here at Fintech Cadence. My background, I did a couple of years of management consulting, strategy consulting. So really from the business side, I'm familiar with. And then I actually started a nonprofit to support startups focused on improving the financial lives of Canadians, particularly those more financially vulnerable. And now that's IFH Lab, and we joined forces with Fintech Cadence earlier this year. So your topic that you're working on, whichever Fintech teams, feel free to reach out to me on Discord after this, because this is an area that I've been spending my last 3 years on, actually. So go-to-market strategy. First of all, does anyone know, I think before I actually go on this slide, does anyone know what go-to-market strategy is? Are they familiar with that term? Yes, no? Okay, no. I'll take the no for an answer. So all go-to-market strategy is your plan on how to acquire customers. That's really what go-to-market strategy is. How to get your target customers, get in front of them, demonstrate your value, and have them actually purchase whatever you're trying to sell them. That's your go-to-market strategy. Now, a framework that we can use to think of go-to-market strategy is something called the business model canvas. And business model canvas, it's a brainstorming tool. And actually, Karina, there's an online form that you can use with your teams later to really just jot down all of the different areas of your business. So I know in your previous 2 workshops, you thought about the problem, you thought about the solution. Now, when you're thinking of about the business, this framework is just one way for you to look at all of the different elements of a business and how they all match together. So this is a framework created by Strategizer, actually a firm here in Toronto, that a lot of companies use to do innovation. And the way to look at it is that this left-hand side here is what you're doing. So it's what partners you have, what activities you have, what resources do you need, what advantages you have on that side. And then the right-hand side is how you're selling it. So, and how you're actually getting to customers. So who are you approaching? What's your relationship with your customers, the channels, and embedded in the middle is your value proposition. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on as well. But for you as a team, like when you're just coming up with an idea, it's really useful to just jot down like your ideas on this business model canvas and see if for that customer segment, does your value proposition make sense? For like those channels, are you doing the right activities? Like it has to sync, it has to match up. So that's the way to, it's a brainstorming tool really for innovation, for you to look at everything on one page. Now, when we talk about go-to-market strategy and our focus for today, it's really this right-hand side. It's around the piece around getting to customers. So that's what we'll be talking about. And I think for your purposes as like a pitch, as coming up with a hackathon, like it's very hard at this point to figure out your cost structure and make it all make sense. Most important is at this point is just what's the plan on getting in front of customers? Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Cool. So I'll be going through some of these one by one and just talking about it at a high level, and tell me if I'm going to, like, I'm assuming that this is kind of business 101. So tell me if it's too simple, or tell me if I'm using terminology that you don't understand and I need to explain as well. So the first piece that I'm going to start off with is the customer segments. The first thing you have to ask yourself is, who are we actually creating value for, and who are those most important customers? And I assume that you did a design thinking workshop earlier today. I assume you talked a lot about that, around like thinking of a persona and what does their life look like? Is it like a 25-year-old female who has certain habits, or is it a 40-year-old male who has different habits, who has kids and different considerations? Like you have to think about that individual and what their personal pains they're experiencing with whatever product they're doing, and what are potential advantages and gains that they can do. So that's really the high level piece of thinking through the customer segment. I'm not going to talk too much about it unless there's specific questions, because I think you did cover this. But I only want to say that like a lot of you need to narrow down on your customer segment, because that affects, like when we're talking about go-to-market strategy, it's about reaching those specific customers. So if you don't know who your target customers are, then you're not going to be able to develop an effective go-to-market strategy, right? Just because they're on different platforms, they have different habits, etc. Okay, so value proposition. The question here is, what core value do you actually deliver to the customer, and what needs are you satisfying? That's what you have to ask yourself. Have you thought of your value propositions yet? Have you gone through that exercise? No, it doesn't seem like it. Okay, so with value proposition, there's a lot of templates you can use, but a very simple one is, for that target customer, what is their need or opportunity that they're experiencing? What's your product? And then, so what does your product do? And then what's the benefit that your product is providing? And I would suggest you, and we'll do this later on, but I would suggest you just try and fill this template out and see if you can explain it in those terms. And that's where you start, and then you can refine it. So here's an example right now. I'm sure you all know the company, right? But this is for Amazon early on, just a sample value proposition. So for people that are on the internet who want to read books, so that's the opportunity. Their product is a website and specifically a retail bookseller. And then what they have here is that provides instant access to over 1.1 million books. That's the benefit that they're providing to their customers, right? So that's a very simple way, like that's what you want to get to, right? For whatever products that you're trying to create. One tip here is that what is value, right? You have to convey value in a specific and understandable language. So there's specific things that you can do for customers. You can make their lives easier by doing things faster. You can save them money, right? You can create something that's higher quality. So you can create a better mousetrap. You can create a table that looks nicer, right? Like you can do something like that. So it could be higher quality. You don't want to use words that don't mean anything. So innovative, even though like it's a term that we use a lot, innovate, all of that, innovative like doesn't mean anything. You can't be the most innovative app because what's that tangible value, right? That just means innovative just means new, but it doesn't actually like, why would a client be interested? Why would a customer be interested in just getting the newest thing? It doesn't really match. It has to offer something to their lives, right? So you don't use terminology like that. Don't say you're the best because it's going to be the most innovative, because that doesn't mean anything to like investors or partners or customers, right? These are really, there's only a couple of levers that you can use, which is like efficiency, way cheaper, efficiency, higher quality. And typically you can't do all three of these things, right? So you have to hone in on what's the two things that you will do better than everyone else. Because if you're trying to do all of it, it's just like, when you look back at the business model canvas, like your activities won't make sense at that point, right? You're going to have to, if you're trying to create the highest quality, you're going to like spend all that effort trying to create that better table, right? So how are you going to offer it for cheaper? It just won't work from that standpoint. So make sure you think of that. So what I want to do is just a very quick exercise for 2 minutes for whatever solution you've come up with. Just quickly fill out this template. So for, who, are, is, that. And then if you do it faster, what you can do is you can say unlike. So unlike, and this is where you refer to your competitors. So unlike other products, you do X better. So I want you to do that for 2 minutes. I'll stop you, and then we'll do that first. So I'll give you guys 2 minutes.
If ever you guys want to go in a breakout room to go discuss with the rest of your team, don't hesitate, and we can put you there too.
For breakout rooms, are you gonna do
I can
that?
do,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I was going to, okay, thank you.
I think what we'll do is, like, how's everyone feeling? Were you able to create one by yourself?
Wait, I'm just a little bit confused, guys. Are we going to breakout rooms right now?
No,
Not
I would use all
necessarily.
the rooms. Yeah. So I think we'll do it individually for now, and then post our workshop. So 1 hour, like when we're done, just because we have a lot of content, I want you guys all to actually compare with your teams and see what you came up with and see if it actually matches, because I think that's important. So let's bring the team back. And once they're back, we'll get started again. But how's does anyone want to share what they came up with, and we can give some live feedback?
Team 9 has his hand up.
Oh, go for it, Arib.
Sure. So I didn't really get to discuss with my team member in this workshop, but I did get my team's been talking about what our service is all about. So happy to share that with everyone. For us, we're going to be focusing on the demographic of people that need help with spending money responsibly and managing a budget. So we're creating an application that helps users with managing their money and their budgeting. And our statement of need is, I guess we can talk about who. So it's, I would assume it would be those individuals that have like a lot of excess capital, like money that is usually left over for like luxury items, or, like within the young generation, because they don't necessarily have bills and payments that are going to cost too much. And our product or service name is Dime. The way that it works is that every month the user chooses one high value item that they want to save up for. And every time they do a transaction, a certain percent of markup is applied. So for example, let's say they want to save 10%. If they go and buy a product for like $5, they will be charged an extra 50 cents. That 50 cents will go into their pool for what they're saving money for. So that is basically our service. And then also we provide a budgeting service, which will enable people to track where their money is going. And our statement of benefit is that we help users with, hold on, I can find our statement of benefit. Just give me 1 second. We have a slogan. Save more, invest more. So you save money so that you can invest in what you want to buy.
Okay. No, I think that's awesome. I think it's a really good first step. A couple, and just so everyone knows, a couple points of feedback here, right? So one thing is, for the target customer, think of it as, because you mentioned your target customer is like people that need to budget, right? But that's already leading to your application. So that's, you're defining it by, I would do it a bit more like it has to be for people who struggle with making money or struggle with saving money, versus for people who need a budget application, we're a budget application, right? Another thing I would say is, when you're saying about who you are, you get into product features very quickly. Remember, think high level. Our product is an app that helps people save money better. But then I think what you're missing is, how do you do that better than how are you actually, what is it they're struggling with budgeting right now that you would solve? I think that's the gap. So this is the type of stuff, you kind of keep on refining it. But a couple of points of feedback right there, but good first, I think, first value proposition to start from.
Thank you for the feedback.
So getting to the competition, right? So this is the unlike piece. And this is purely just for how do you actually communicate who you are and why you're better than your competitors. And there's a couple of ways to do that. You can think of 2 features, and you can do it on a matrix level, right? And you can say affordable, expensive, the cheapness scale, and then this is online, offline. And then you can just map your competitors this way to see where you play a role. That's one way for you to show where you stand and where your positioning is against competitors. A different way would be to show all of the different features and show what your competitors are doing and what you're doing differently. These are a couple of options for you when you're presenting and pitching to express where you're different from what exists out there already. One thing to watch out for here with competition is that sometimes entrepreneurs will say that there is no competition. We're the first to market. That's never going to be the case. And it's not, you have to think broader if that's the case, because yes, there may not be the exact same app as you. And later on, we'll talk about, like, let's say you were the very first online dating app, right? So yes, there wasn't other online dating apps, but your competition in that standpoint is how people met in like other capacities. So if people were meeting at churches and bowling groups, or if people were meeting because of friends, that's your competition, right? Because you're creating something, they have to change their habits in order to get on your platform. So just you have to think broad about what people are doing and how they're spending their money and how they're spending their time, and not if there's exactly the same product as you, for example. The next piece is customer relationships in the business model canvas. I don't want to spend too much time on this. All it is to say is that how you envision your customer actually interacting with your product will really affect how you're also marketing and selling to them. So so some of these customer relationships, it could be just purely transactional. So you could be, an example of that is you're a little store at the airport and there's no customer relationship. Like, it's just that an individual walks and sees the store, they need to buy headphones for their flight, and you're the first one there, and then they'll pick it up. So it's a purely transactional relationship, versus a very long-term one would be like your insurance company or your bank, right? Where it's much more important for them to constantly deliver value to you, to actually like know all of your data, all of those things, right? You can think of communities, like online communities like Reddit, or like any, that's another type of like how the customer actually interacts with your company, is that they're actively participating with other users, right? And that changes your go-to-market strategy as well. This is just types of customer relationships. I actually don't think, this is just, again, mindset for you to think of how your customer is going to interact with your business. That's all. And for revenue, we'll talk quickly about different revenue models that exist out there. So there's 7 common ones here that I've listed. There's obviously other ones as well. For the 7 common ones, I'm just gonna go explain them kind of one by one pretty quickly. So your asset sale is when you're selling a product, right? So for all of you, when you're coming up with your product, you have to, and your solution, you have to think of how you're making money. So it could be that you're actually you have a phone and you're selling each widget, right? That's your most common asset sale, right? There's usage fee, which is another way to make money. And for usage fee, that's like a hotel room, let's say. So the more often that they use a service, the more that the customer would pay. So if they're there for 2 nights, they pay for 2 nights, right? There's subscriptions costs. So Netflix, right? Any like Spotify, which I'm sure you all use, where you're just paying a monthly fee. I think for apps, subscription is typically a very common way for tech businesses to make money. Both consumer ones and also business ones would sell software to businesses, and they pay per user per month, right? You can always do renting or leasing or lending, and that's usually you have some sort of asset like a house or car, and you're granting people to use that for a month exclusively, right? Which is a bit different from subscription, where a bunch of people are using the same thing. It's not exclusive. Licensing is how like music producers make money. So they have IP, they have intellectual property, they have content that they own, but they can license it to others to sell. And brokerage fee, advertising. I think a lot of you may potentially, I think early entrepreneurs think of advertising as a way to make money because of Facebook and because of some things that we all know, where you just get a bunch of users. And then once you have a bunch of users, you can then go to advertisers and be like, hey, I have a bunch of users. Why don't you have advertising, right? I'll say that for advertising, it's a very tricky revenue model. So I don't know what your plans are, or what, I have no idea what your businesses are at this point. But I think that typically if your plan is to get a ton of users and then monetize later and make money later by selling that data and those users like that, it's a very hard game to play right now with Google and Facebook dominating like advertising space. And it's also really hard for you to get a ton of users. And now there's backlash against advertising, right? I know you're all much younger than me, like 10 years younger than me. So I know Gen Z is typically a lot more socially aware. And I know that people are more conscious of like what's being sold through them through advertising. So just something to be aware of, but obviously advertising is always, it's still a good model, but just something to be aware of. And then brokerage fees is, we'll actually watch a pitch later that has to do with brokerage fees, but that's taking a cut so you're helping somebody else, you're being an intermediary. So there's a buyer and there's a seller, and you're actually helping facilitate that, and then you take a cut of that money that the seller would get. So that's brokerage fees. And finally, this is like kind of the big part that I want to talk about today, which is the channel aspect. And this is how you actually get in front of your company. So through which channels will you actually reach your customers is the question here. And the purpose of this chart here on the right is just to tell you that for the most part, you can either be a marketing driven company or you can be a sales driven company, right? So they're two different things. And a question for all of you to ask with your solution is, should we spend our time marketing or should we spend our time selling and going one-on-one to sales? And it's going to be a bit mixed, but you have to determine that. So like a couple of factors to consider, right? Is like, for that user, is it a cheap purchase or is it an expensive purchase, right? Are you reaching a lot of people or are you reaching a few people? The example here is like Crest toothpaste versus this is like an airplane jet engine, for example, right? Is it simple, complex? I'm not going to go through all of this like one by one, but these are like, we'll share the slides later. These are the things you want to ask yourselves, because the more complex, expensive, the longer it takes for you to make a sale, the more likely then you have to build one-on-one sales relationships with the people that are buying, right? So whereas if you're a cheap commodity product that you're doing that's like $1 a month or $1 doesn't make, like people can do it on impulse and purchase it, then you're focused on like a lot of social media advertising and marketing and all of that, right? So depending on your product, it's going to influence how you want to reach your user. So you have to think of that experience. Again, this is a framework that will be in the slides, but this is just, it's called the Bullseye framework, but I like this only because it lists 19 different ways to get in front of your users out here. The idea of this framework is that if you're actually running a startup, you pick a couple of these things and you test it. You test about 6 of them to determine what's actually working. So it's everything from, are you focused on public relations? So public relations would be a lot of news articles about yourself and generating it that way. Or are you focused on, it could be, another one is affiliate marketing. Affiliate marketing would be like your focus is actually going to a bunch of blog and having bloggers and different platforms like partners actually showcase your company, and then through them, like podcasts would be an example as well. Their podcasts are affiliates, so podcasters would actually like, they have little ad segments, right? And then they'll say on their ad segments, hey, if you register with this link, then you'll get like 5% off or something. So that's like a way to use affiliates and get in front of your customers. And then the podcasters will get a cut of what your revenue is. So look up the Bullseye framework, because that'll just come up with, like, you'll just come up with ideas for all the different channels we can use. And then you can choose which ones make sense for your products. And I'll quickly talk about some sample go-to-markets for 3 very different companies. And this is examples of how you want to approach it when you're doing your pitch tomorrow. So, and I think the idea here is that there's these concepts in terms of different channels you can use, but then you really have to hone in again on where your customers are at. So the first one I'm going to use is Tinder, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, right? And how Tinder actually grew very quickly at the beginning was they knew that they needed users on their platform. So what they actually did was the chief marketing officer, who's actually the CEO of Bumble, Whitney Wolf, she actually went campus to campus, went to sororities, made presentations about Tinder, got all of the sororities to download Tinder, and then would go to the fraternity and then get, like, say, hey, all the girls in your campus are on Tinder, so you should all download it, right? So that's how they got their first 15,000, 20,000 users, like, very quickly. And also in a way that's very cost effective, because it's really, she just needs to go in and talk to them and download. They also hosted a bunch of hosted a bunch of parties where people downloaded Tinder, like, as part of the theme of the party, right? So these are some hack ways that you can do it. But you can think of Tinder, like, their ideal segment was college-aged students, right? So that was their way to, like, get in front of college-age students, and, like, a lot of their initial users were in that segment. So it was very targeted in that sense. And then after that, like, once they build that user base, then they can shift towards more social media. They can shift towards, like, other channels, but they really built that user base through that, like, direct going campus to campus, right? Wealthsimple, which I'm sure you're, again, all familiar with. It's an investing app, really big here in Canada. One of their benefits of Wealthsimple was that they had a lot of money. Like, they had big venture capital firms invest in them early on. So they had a lot of cash to use that maybe other similar startups may not have. And what they actually did with that money was they were really focused on creating this, like, honest brand. And they spent it on more traditional means of, like, a lot of advertising through social media, through, like, commercials, right? And so I'm not sure if you've seen those commercials, but on YouTube as well, they have commercials with Aubrey Plaza, different famous celebrities that we would know. And the way that they did their advertising was that Aubrey Plaza would talk about her own financial experience, or Alison Roman or Joel Kuhn Booster. Like, these semi-famous, they're not A-list celebrities, but they're definitely famous celebrities with followings, would just give a very honest approach of, like, their own financial struggles. And if you look at their website, look at their marketing, they're very millennial focused and I would say younger focused. So they had really good, clean diversity as well. So it wasn't all just white males that were all their advertising. It was like, they have women, they have different people of color, they have different ages. So it's very honest in that way. And it's all centered around this whole financial journey. And then Stripe. Do you guys know who Stripe is? Like, the startup Stripe? Have you heard of it? Okay, good. So Stripe is it's the most, I believe it's the most valuable company, like, startup right now in the US. And it is a payment. It helps with online payments. It's an online payment processor. And while Tinder and Wealthsimple were focused on getting consumers and getting users, Stripe is selling to businesses. So the way that they're doing it is like Stripe doesn't do your advertising, it doesn't do marketing in that sense. What Stripe is doing is they're going to actual developers and companies, and they're focused on selling it that way. And if you think of traditionally, like that sales process is, oh, you go to a company, you show them a demo, you try and convince them to buy your product. Like that's what you would usually do. But Stripe was actually like offering their product available for free, like for developers to experiment with, and having the developers in companies actually be the ones that advocate for the companies to adopt Stripe. So they made it super easy for developers to test their products rather than being very rigid with showing their demos. So that's just a couple of ways that you can approach this. So again, all this is to say you have to think of if you're targeting to college-age students, targeting to like millennials that want to save money, or if you're targeting to developers, all very different strategies. Cool. Any questions? Okay, so that was my quick, like very, very quick go-to-market piece. I'm gonna quickly pivot because the second part of our session, the next 20 to 30 minutes, we want to talk about pitches and storytelling because that's what you're doing tomorrow. I'm gonna show you a quick pitch right now. Can you guys see this?
Rain Takahashi, the co-founder of Canadian-based
what you need when you on-demand hotel rooms, on-demand rides, on-demand assembly help, even on-demand love. See, we live in an on-demand world where you can get what you need when you need it in real time. But with all this advancement in technology, why is it so hard to get insurance? The other day, I went to go get coverage, and this is what my broker sent me. And this. And this. And even the industry executives agree that innovation is lacking and a change is needed. Wouldn't it be nice if you could get insurance as quickly and easily as you can an Uber or a hotel room? Well, now you can. Hi, everyone. My name's Rain. I'm one of the co-founders of Jonton, and we're here to create on-demand insurance for an on-demand world. So how does it work? Well, like all companies, we had to start somewhere, so we started with travel insurance, where we partner with great brands like AIG to turn this into this, where users can now sign up for insurance on their phone. They only have to sign up once, and regardless of whether you change insurance carriers or not, everything's saved to the phone, so you never have to fill in another form. And then each time you go traveling, you simply flick the switch. When you get home, you turn it off, and you're done. You only pay for what you use. It could be for an hour to cross the border to go shopping, or a regular 1, 2, 3 week trip, completely flexible. On top of that, we have every major airport and border crossing geo-fenced to remind you to turn your insurance on before you leave your country. Of course, there's benefits for the insurance companies as well. Insurance companies now get access to new types of data, such as when you leave, when you get back, and where you go in between. So much so that as we get hundreds and thousands of these data points back, we're going to be able to combine that with our AI algorithms to help our insurance partners better manage risk, lower their losses, reduce fraud exposure, saving the industry millions, if not billions, each year. Our insurance partners get all this at no upfront cost. We simply take a small transaction fee for each transaction that goes through our platform. As mentioned, we're starting in travel. It's a $250 million opportunity for us, or a $1.2 billion opportunity for our insurance partners. But we're already expanding into other areas, such as on-demand drone insurance, on-demand Airbnb insurance, on-demand small business insurance, and I kid you not, we're doing on-demand dog walker insurance. And when you start to add up the market opportunity of each of these segments, it quickly becomes a $1 billion opportunity for us, or for our insurance partners, a $20 billion new market opportunity. And please keep in mind, these figures are Canada and US only. As for progress, we founded the company a year ago. We quickly signed our first set of insurance companies, including AIG, on a 3-year deal. We released our beta in September. We're going to be going live with AIG in Canada next week. And then from there, we'll be expanding worldwide alongside the other verticals, such as drone insurance and small business insurance, going into 2018 and 2019, putting us well on track to do $1 million in revenue going into 2019. And we did all this with no funding, completely bootstrapped. Oh, thank you. I was not expecting that. Thanks. I myself have previous startup experience and have over 10 years of experience with big brands like Volkswagen, sorry, Daniela, and Unilever. On top of that, my co-founder, Ian, he is a serial entrepreneur with various without our great development team, keeping us compliant with the strict industry standards or industry compliance of this insurance industry. So on-demand insurance. Our vision at Johnton is to allow you, the policyholder, to use your insurance the way you want to use it while opening up new market opportunities and new markets and opportunities for our insurance partners. And if you're still not convinced that this is the future of insurance, then the next time you go to get insurance and you get something like this, please keep us in mind and how much time, money, and effort you could have saved by simply going on demand. Thank you.
Awesome. So that was Rain, who's a Canadian founder who's done a really good job with pitching. So quick question here. Just want to hear a quick discussion. Any thoughts around the pitch, what you liked and what you didn't like? Who wants to go?
What I like is that he's showing the phone's interface and kind of like what the Figmo's telling us to do. And it's really easy just to switch on and off feature that's really simple for users, which kind of echoes what you're saying that if you're advertising for an app's advantage, you don't want to be innovative. You want to be quicker, faster, and cheaper, so like that.
Yeah, and he did it without even saying we're faster. He just showed it with the product demo.
Yeah, it implies.
Yeah. Steven, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say that just really showed like the ease of the feature. The one thing that I was looking for more was like who is actually using it. And I wish there was more of a story around that. I know he talked about like crossing the border or whatnot, but to me, I was still trying to think of like, when would I use this instead of just having what's already going for me?
That's true. He wasn't very narrow with his target market.
Granted, he threw out some pretty big figures, which is eye-catching. So that is the pro of it.
Other comments? Someone said, Han said quite aggressive. Was that good aggressive or bad aggressive, Han?
Well, the tone that he had wasn't like friendly, you know. He was I think it was more a bad aggressive than a good aggressive. His voice sounded like really like angry, and you know he wants you to, you know, accept his creation, you know. So I think it was more of a bad aggressive than a good aggressive.
Okay, no, I think that's fair. I think Karina will talk a little bit more about that as well later on in terms of tone and how you want to present and tailor into the audience. Something else I want to just mention for this is he had a very clear, like something we want to mention is like, why now? Like why is your startup the right startup for right this instant? And he did that very effectively at the beginning just by saying everything is on demand. Why does insurance suck, right? So it's so obvious, like, okay, this is something where we need new products and services. So he did a really good job with that for sure.
I have a quick question on the founder part, because I think that seems to be very important to, at least like with investing, but I assume with pitches too, is why the founders. And I just wanted to hear your perspective in this type of scenario where it's, for some people, random groups thrown together and like very quick turnarounds.
Yeah, I think for you as a hackathon, it's hard, but because you're all students, right? Like I'm guessing you haven't built all these big startups in the past and sold them. Otherwise, why are you here, right? I think then what you want to feature when you're talking about your team is why you have the technical, like why you have the expertise at least. So if you have a technical person and a business person and a design person, and it could be like just as simple as that, like we know we have the right components of a team, but I think in your scenario and for your judging purposes, I assume that it's not going to be a big differentiator for any of the teams, just because you're all going to be pretty similar. I don't think the judges will, that's going to be a big thing that you need to focus on your side today. But once you're actually in the startup world, it does matter, I would say. Cool. I'm going to pass it off to Karina now.
Yes, Alice, can you continue sharing the slides?
Yeah.
Are you good with that? Okay, perfect. So with the 50 minutes, well, not even left, I'll try to go over a few of key elements that you guys want to have during a pitch. So next slide, please, Elvis. So life is a pitch. And I know some of you might not like this, but unfortunately it is. When you're going to a job interview, you're pitching. When you're meeting new people, you're pitching. When you're doing a school presentation, you're literally pitching. The idea of a pitch is a seduction. You want to seduce whoever's listening to you. And at the end, you want that to be ended in a sale some way or another. That sales can be anything. I mean, if you're going on a date, that sale can be the man you will eventually marry. But at the end of the day, that's kind of what you want to get into. So it's really important to kind of think of all these elements when you're building that story that you're going to present. Now, I know that some of you might be more, or maybe not that good with presenting things, but unfortunately, you guys really have to work on that pitch, because if you have a great idea and that idea is not sold well, you'll never be able to scale. And that's one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs that have great businesses do struggle a lot with. So first thing first, who are you talking to? I think the audience is the most important, or at least the key part that I want you guys to keep in mind, is that you have to curate that pitch for an audience. Most entrepreneurs will have at least 10 different pitches in their back pockets, always ready to go. And they'll curate those pitches, and they'll change no matter who they're talking to. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about value proposition a bit earlier, you gotta keep in mind that the person you're talking to has a specific need, and you want to get that need into. So Elvis, next slide. So there's different people you can pitch to. The one before that, sorry. So maybe you're pitching to an investor. Maybe you're pitching to a judge, like in this case. Maybe you're pitching to an incubator you want to go into. Maybe you're pitching to a client or a customer or even a corporate buyer you want to acquire. Maybe you're pitching to talent people you want to hire, or even just a media outlet. So each of these different personas, we can say, have a different need. So for example, if you're pitching to an investor, and I want your participation, guys, so please write it in the comment section. If you're pitching to, no, it's not there. If you're pitching to an investor, what do you think the investor wants? You can unmute if you want, if you don't want to just put it in the chat. Yes, team number 9.
The why now piece.
Sorry?
Why now?
Why now? Okay, that's an interesting perspective. Arif, did you have another answer?
A projection on their returns.
Projection on, yeah. Somebody said profit also in the revenue. That I think ultimately, I think an investor, there's many things they'll look at at first. They want to look at, are they looking to see if you're a good team? They're looking to see if you have market traction. But at the end of the day, they want to know if they're going to get money, if they're going to have money return after the end of this long journey. Next slide, Elvis. So, and of course, when you're pitching to an investor, that's also what you're looking at. You want to make money. You want them to invest you, and you want to prove them in the long run, you'll be able to bring them back. So it's kind of, you'll have to curate that pitch to make sure that you're creating this rapport, and that the person you're pitching to understands that that's your goal, and that's his goal will also be set in with whatever you're presenting. So in your cases, you guys are presenting to judges. The first little tip I would give you, if you don't know who your judges are, I would ask your organizers to know maybe who are your judges, to kind of get ready and already have in mind who you're pitching to. You can even go stalk them on LinkedIn if you want, and kind of see what's their background, where they came from, and maybe just incorporate a couple of these elements through your presentation. Now, I don't recommend you guys sending them any messages on LinkedIn. I've already seen this in the past. This is very abrasive. I don't think that the judges appreciate that at all. They kind of see it as a bribery. But I do recommend that you kind of go see beforehand what they want, who they are at least. What's their background? You can go to next slide, Elvis. That one. Guidelines and criteria. I know you don't have I shouldn't have put that slide exactly like that, but I know you guys don't have the perfect guidelines of what will be the criteria, but you do have a general criteria around what to build your pitch. Make sure that you follow these criteria. It's super important. If you're pitching example to an incubator, I would recommend going to see what's their timeline, what you're going to get out of it. In this case, it's a competition. So you want to stand out as a team. So kind of make sure you really follow those guidelines. One of those guidelines, of course, is timing. So that you'll have to keep that in mind as well. Now, next part is, what is that story you want to tell? And I know that a lot of students are engineering students and you guys really love frameworks, but I'm not a big fan of frameworks because I really believe that everyone has their own story to tell. So this might change through time, and I think you guys should be, or try to be, as original in your own framework. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about constructing the story, it's just essentially numbers of arcs that you're going to want to put back to back together. When we were talking about the Jonathan pitch just before, Jonathan, when he was presenting the application, he kind of started with the first arc being, we have a pain problem. We have all these paperwork that's way too complicated to fill out. Why? This is not normal, not in this situation. And this is what we decided to create as a response. Second arc was, well, it's working. We're having traction. We're getting numbers up, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last arc, he finished by saying, hey, market is really big. We can get even more revenue out of this product. So we're really a business that has a potential of growing, right? So these were all these different story arcs. Now, the way you assemble them is not very important. Also, you guys have had the prototype that you filled out, and we went over a bit of the code to market strategy. So in terms of what are these blocks, I would recommend building them around these different elements and kind of making different story arcs for these different elements, because you guys have a very, very long presentation. Elvis, you can go to next. Yeah. For each of these different elements that you want to integrate into your pitch, there's different ways of bringing it up. These are just a couple of examples that people often use, and these are different frameworks you can use. So you can use the persona, personal journeys. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of specific frameworks, but you can go through these. Next slide also, Elvis. Again, frameworks. I was really hesitating between putting this slide or not. Just to give you a quick example so you can keep in mind what a slide deck can look. Startup Playbook actually have a slide deck. This is an investor slide deck. And they kind of filled out their story through their slide. Same thing with Y Combinator. They kind of gave a couple of tips and tricks on how to build that storyline. Of course, these are not, it's a framework. Don't necessarily use those. And also one super important element I want to stress on, I do not want you guys to look at these slide deck and just fill it out with your own information. I want you to do the opposite way around. I want you to build that story, and from that story, you guys build those slides. Super important. Your story will not be genuine if you don't have it already filled out in your head before you fill out your slides. It'll just be like, oh yeah, what am I saying already? What am I? So super important to build that story beforehand before we're putting it into a slide. Next slide, Elvis. Now, the one before that, you just did my punch, Elvis. So the problem when you're doing presentation is there's so many more people than we think that are ADD. I am the first one. When I'm listening to a presentation, at the beginning, I'm listening. I totally zap out like 10 minutes in. And then I come back at the end and I'm like, oh yeah, true, whatever he's saying. And that's how we integrate information. And it is true for a lot of presentation. Now, you guys are very unlucky because you have a 10-minute presentation to do. And I know that a lot of students, when they saw that they had 10 minutes, were like, yes, I have 10 minutes. That's good. It's super long. but generally pitches are much, much shorter. And 10 minutes is actually very dangerous. I want you guys to be scared. I want you not to be sleeping this tonight because of this information. But 10 minutes is very long. And why I say this is very important is 10 minutes is a lot of time to screw up and to be boring and to have like a lot of gaps that don't make any sense. A lot of these bigger pitches like to make it very short so that we make sure that the entrepreneurs stick to the most important parts. Now, the problem when you have a very long presentation is you have to make sure that you always get people hooked on your presentation and they won't start thinking about their groceries tonight, or they won't be thinking about to feed the dog, or, you know, they'll stay tuned into your presentation. So what you want to do is you want to transform this graph into this graph. And the way you'll be doing that is by trying to get as many hooks possible and do the most in times when you think that people are kind of getting off your presentation, you want to get them back into the conversation. Now, the most important hook of all is the first one. The first one is the one, especially now, like you guys are, I think 8, or, well, yeah, there's three tracks. So some of you are just 2 in your own track, but when judges sometimes have like 10 presentations back to back. So you want to make sure that the first seconds are the ones that get them hooked so that they'll want to listen really to your presentation. They'll be on for the whole presentation. They say that we fall in love in 3 seconds. Well, apparently you guys have 5 extra seconds because apparently in a pitch, it's the first 8 seconds that are the most important. So you got to get them hooked with that first 8 seconds. Now you're asking me, well, how do I get these people hooked? Next slide, Elvis. You weren't up to the chase. I didn't get a good hook for you, Elvis. So there's different ways of doing hooks. I've just put, there's way more than just 6, but I've put the most famous one of all. First, storytelling, I think, is one of the most important one of all. There's many ways of doing storytelling. At the end of the day, when you're doing storytelling, you want to create emotions into people. Like, for example, my grandma, which we all call Nonna, had the best sauce in the world. Every Sunday, she would make her secret sauce, and in the house, it would smell so good. We would all wake up and just be happy for supper. That's all we would think of. But I felt like so unhappy because I was like, is it so unfair that I'm the only one who can eat her secret sauce? So I decided to make it a worldwide international sauce. So that's just one of the main storytellings we often see is when we're relating to family members. And the reason why is a lot of people do have family members, so you can easily relate. But you kind of want to create this rapport where people will be able to relate to your story and kind of feel the emotions through your story. Second one, of course, is provocation. You can either provoke through some facts, or you can provoke by just doing a statement that will get everybody on their feet. So an example of a provocation would be 1/3 of Canadians, or 1/3 of people in the world will be diagnosed with cancer in their life. I mean, that's such a sad statistic. Most people will be on their feet and be like, oh, fuck. You're like, you look around the room and you realize like you're 1 out of 3. That's a lot of people, right? Or you can start off with a fact, like I could have started my pitch by saying, all of you are bad at pitching. And you would all be like, hey, why is she saying that? And you'd want to know why, and you wanted me to tell you why you're bad at pitching, right? So you can do like things. Of course, try not to be mean, try not to be too bad with people, but you want to state a statement that people will be like, oh shit, okay, I want to know why she's saying that information. Questions are super good also. They're the favorite tool of all professors. To get students, when they see that their students are sleeping, they'll ask questions. They'll even point to people to make them feel interjected. Again, it's a good way of also getting engagement from the public. And even if people don't necessarily answer back, at the end of the day, when you get an answer, when you hear one being said in a presentation, you're going to be like, oh, yes, no, whatever. And that will get you back into the conversation. Talking too fast, right? Of course, jokes are a great way of having a hook. Funny creates laughter, creates emotions, of course. 2 things about jokes. First, be sure to do a joke that is appropriate. Some people can be very turned off by some jokes, so make sure that they are as normal, as a child safe, or I can say maybe like not adult jokes, please, or not anything inappropriate, right? Second is, sometimes we think these jokes are funny, but they're not. And maybe you'll pull off a joke and you'll see that nobody reacts to it. The only comment I can say, if ever this happens, don't worry, it happens to everyone. Don't make a big deal of it. Just go off to the next hook. It's not a biggie. If ever this happens, whenever you're expecting a reaction from your public and you don't get it, just continue your conversation and go to that next whatever item you have to present. Of course, fun facts are really a great way of getting people hooked. They're also a good way of presenting an idea or a problem you have. Example, I'm talking about how oceans are polluted with plastic, and I could start with fun fact. Did you know that in 2012 there were 30,000 little ducks in the ocean that were found? Just a fun way of getting people like, oh, that's interesting, and then you can go on. Metaphors are also a great way of presenting very complex data. So I love metaphors in so many ways. Example, you can use the metaphor. I put a little iceberg there. I think it's a good one that's often reused also. Of course, try to think outside the box and use your own metaphors, but the iceberg one is often used. Example, 47% of Canadians live paycheck to paycheck. We've looked at their budgets and realized that even though their budgets seem to be clean, there were a whole bunch of these small expenses that were just under that tip of the iceberg. So you can use these to kind of people have them visualize what you're talking about and kind of put it into like a more concrete way of seeing things. This is very important when you have like very complex technical aspect to your design. Some people don't necessarily understand all the aspects of that technical design. So falling into the metaphor to describe this item can be a very good way to make sure that whoever your audience is understands it. It's kind of a dumbed down way to present. Now, next presentation, next slide, Alice. There's so many pitches I would love to have time to present to you, but I know we don't have a lot of time. So what I would give you as a homework tonight is to go through these pitches. They're not the best pitches, but they're good pitches. And I've kind of put a couple of key takeaways from each of these pitches. Also, you'll notice if you go through the list that not everyone are like amazing speakers and not all very used to do public speaking. And that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't have to be the perfect public speaker in the world to do a pitch. You just have to get people hooked on your idea. You have to create that rapport. And then you have to make them want to engage into your product in whatever way that is. I just want to leave you with a couple of do's and don'ts before we leave. And then you guys can meet us in breakout rooms also if you have other questions on whatever we said. So a couple of do's, always look in front of you when you're speaking. This is especially true in the virtual world. A lot of people tend to look at their papers when they're talking, and we see this very well when we're talking on your computer. So try to look directly in front of you. If ever you're not good at remembering things, you can stick a couple of facts, paper notes around your computer, so at least you have them close by. Take short pauses between each idea, especially you guys, you have a very long time span, so you can cut those elements through time. Try to make it as clearly and concise as possible. Like I said before, if you make a mistake, if people don't react the way you do, don't stop, continue doing whatever you're doing. It will just break your pace and it'll make you less comfortable and you'll start stressing over it. Storytelling is everything. Cannot stress that much. Create your story before you present it. And also a lot of things that people often do is that last slide, whatever your slide deck is, that last slide, a lot of people will often put at a slide that's not that important. Example, Q&A. You want to leave whoever you're talking to with a last thought. So if you have like a last business idea, an action item or whatever, make that your last slide. So that's the last thing they see before you finish and before you go into Q&A. Also have confidence in what you say. It will show off. And also nobody wants people that doubt. I mean, if you're selling, at the end of the day, you want to sell whatever you're selling. If you doubt your project, how will they not doubt it? So that's something to keep in mind. In the don't section, I think a lot of them I've already mentioned them, so they're just the opposite. But last two, avoid any sentences like we are the Uber of, we are the Airbnb of. A lot of people use them. They have been used too many times. People are fed up of hearing them. Investors would sometimes say, I will not invest in a company if they dare say that I am the Airbnb of whatever. So try to be original in whatever you're saying. Try to not be too cliche. These sentences do fall into the cliche section. And last but not least, I know this is a hackathon. You don't have time to necessarily grow a huge MVP, but still, if you are focusing on the technical aspects of your business, be sure to make it clear and don't try to not make it too central part of your whole presentation. Also, it always depends on the judges, but judges often find it very hard if you just stick to the technical aspects. And if you do have a lot of technical aspects, like I said before, use metaphors. Try to make them as easy and comprehensible as possible. So that's pretty much, I mean, pitch presentation could have like hours and hours on end of tips and tricks I can give, but these were the most focused that we could give you. So if you have any other questions, and we do have a couple of mini homework for you guys. So if ever you guys want to come and see us, you can come in with a 1-minute pitch and we can try to help you with certain elements that we kind of see that don't work too well, or just things you can work on. Same thing, if you want to work on your value proposition or your business model, come in with something filled out so we can just help you, guide you from there.
Great, thank you so much, Karina and Elvis, for this wonderful workshop. I've learned a lot, so I'm guessing that all the attendees also learned a lot. So as Karina quickly said, and as you can see on the slide, we'll go on Discord now, except if people have maybe general questions that they'd like to share with the rest of the current cliches effective hooks. Well, Karina, what do you think?
Yes, if you're right, cliche, like hooks can be very cliche. I recommend for you, like if you do use a hook that is cliche, make sure that it is your secret sauce and it's not necessarily one you've heard before. Yeah, you're right.
Any other questions maybe? Or if not, we'll just go on Discord. So as the previous workshops, we'll have two oral, like vocal channels, one for Karina and one for Elvis. And we'll also have like a chat that I'll be monitoring. So if ever you have questions, feel free to also ask there. Good. Okay, well, thank you guys, and see you on Discord then.
Sweet.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.